Man, sometimes it feels so fucking good to be right. Now, I ain't right yet, and so we're going to give it a little bit of time, but we have quite an interesting story brewing with the Bryan Kohberger Idaho 4 murder case. I'm JB this is Crime Time. I'm telling you, Kohberger is walking. I've been telling you guys. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. By the way, y'all ain't shit for getting that sisters fired. Y'all are scumbags for that. Let's do it.
Bring it back.
What's going on, everybody? As you guys know, I'm JB Gunner, and this is Crime Time with JB Gunner. Guys, before we get started, I want to say a couple things. Number one, I am starting to get better. My voice is coming back. It's still not quite to where I want it to be. You know, I hear me every day, so I see when my voice ain't 100% right, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We will be back to doing regular shit. I'll be doing live streams over here, things like that. But I do want to say thank you to everybody that supports the channel, regardless of the method you choose, whether it's Cash App, Patreon, Venmo, PayPal. Truth is, guys, I couldn't do this each and every day as often as I do on all of my channels if it was not for you, the Gun Squad. So big shout out to you guys. And if you too find value in my content, feel free to hit the links down below. Support the channel. By the way, while you're down there, if you're not a snowflake and you can handle a little bit of shit, preferably if you're conservative, you can go check out my political channel, my other live stream channel, my gaming channel, all my wrestling channel, all that shit. They are down in the description box. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in this because this shit has me hyper. Guys, I've sat and watched everybody argue the fact when I say they don't have anything on Kohberger. I have said that, in my opinion, Kohberger is calm for a reason. I think Kohberger is going to walk on this case. Now, it does not mean I think 100% he's not guilty. I have no fucking clue, just like you. I don't know. Kohberger might have done it. When I look at Kohberger right there, I don't see killer. I've already said that. I don't believe Kohberger. Deep down in my soul, I don't believe Bryan Kohberger did this, but it is possible. What I do believe, however, is that they have no evidence. They have absolutely no evidence, and we're going to start off by talking about that a little bit before we jump into the actual news. You understand that when the Idaho Forensics Lab, the police department, went over the knife sheath, they didn't find any DNA. They did not find any touch DNA or anything like that until they sent it to a lab in Texas. A startup lab that's never done it before in current cases. Let that sink in for just a second. They've never done it before in current cases. The defense is going to eat that up. Imagine me just creating a startup lab and all of a sudden I'm doing DNA testing. You'd be like, man, I ain't trusting JB. Not with that shit. He's too much of a freak. He's over there eating the DNA and shit, you know. I see you, girl. Anyway, you see my point? You'd be like, nah, I ain't doing that. JB's, it's not likely. It's not credible. So I want you to understand, Idaho lab found nothing. Nothing. No DNA. No nothing on the knife sheath. They sent it to Texas, and now all of a sudden, there's other DNA, and now they're using ancestral DNA to nail Kohberger. That's number one. Number two, we've talked about the fact that why is it that nobody found the knife sheath on their first walkthroughs of the crime scene? That's going to lead us to a couple things. We all kind of looked at it and said, well, maybe it was planted. Maybe there was something goofy going on. I have no clue. Chances are the knife sheath was left there by the killer, which could have been Kohberger. But all we need is reasonable doubt for Kohberger to walk, and which I think we're going to get here. Is Bryan Kohberger's trial in jeopardy? Police officer is implicated in an internal affairs probe that could threaten the Idaho murder case. What do we have here? Remember, we're not talking about whether you think he's guilty or not, you motherfucker. We are talking about whether you can convince a jury. I've told you over and over, if they were to subpoena me, if they were to bring me in for jury trial with the evidence that I currently know about, and I cover this case every day, I would not even not even 1% would I think about saying Bryan Kohberger is guilty without a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. I would never convict this man to death because of the information and the evidence that's been presented to us. Not even 1%. So you got to ask yourself how many other people on the juries could possibly feel that way. And shit like this makes it worse. Because now people genuinely think, already people were thinking that the cops set him up and that things like this was possible. Bryan Kohberger, age 28, is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students. Prosecutors have provided potential Brady Gigolo material to the defense related to an officer involved with Kohberger's case. Now, let me explain to you what this is. Kohberger's due in court June 26th. Let me make this very clear to you, okay? I'm the defense. All right, you don't have anything else. Let's go ahead and say this. The phone pings could have came from anywhere. The phone pings have a 27 square mile radius. It's not that big of a deal. The phone pings mean absolutely nothing. The knife sheath isn't even Kohberger's DNA at the moment. Oh, and here's what's crazy. I want to see what kind of information they have now because he's in custody. They can get his DNA. Does Bryan Kohberger's DNA actually match the DNA on the knife sheath? See, before they just did a unreliable DNA testing that most people don't even accept in the court. It's a science that is heavily contested, and that's the ancestral DNA. When the knife sheath was found, nobody found anything, and so they sent it off to another lab to look a little bit more. It is what it is. So a lot of us always have wondered why they didn't find the knife when they first did a walkthrough, the first responders. It wasn't until 4 p.m. when Officer Payne came, Brett Payne, and we'll talk about him. Because I want to make this clear, if the officer involved in this case I want to ask you guys this, if the officer with an internal affairs investigation is Brett Payne, Bryan Kohberger is walking. Because this entire case relies on the affidavit from Brett Payne. So and we don't know this yet because it's redacted, if we find out that this officer that is being probed is Brett Payne, Bryan Kohberger will walk, period. Prosecutors have disclosed that a police officer involved in the Bryan Kohberger case is the subject of an internal affairs probe that could threaten the Idaho murder trial. Brady material is information that could potentially exculpatory for the defense. Gigolo material is information that could impeach the credibility of a witness. Now, why would this matter? Why would this be so important? Because maybe the witness they're talking about is the one that wrote the affidavit, the Alpha David. Ooh, feels good, don't it? Feels good. Let me say that again. Because the potential officer could be the guy that wrote the very Alpha David that the entire case rests on. Let's go ahead. Let's continue. Ooh, feels good. Which in this case would be an officer who worked on the Kohberger case. At the request of the prosecution, a protective order was granted by Latah County Magistrate Judge Megan Marshall to keep the material, which contains personal records, from being publicly disclosed. So, of course, they're keeping it, to themselves. Because they're not going to let the shit out. This is going to be a masterpiece. Prosecutors are disclosing the material under the obligation of 2 Supreme Court cases, Brady versus Maryland and Giglio versus the United States. The state has become aware of potential Brady Giglio material related to one of the officers involved in the case, the motion wrote. The state intends to disclose this information to the defendant's counsel, prosecutor says, while adding that the information is confidential and exempt from public disclosures. I want you to see what this says. Fox News reported. Brady material is any evidence that could prove the defendant is not guilty. Say that again, Fox. Say it again. Say it again. Any evidence that could prove the defendant to be not guilty. Just want to make that clear for you guys one more time. Let's go ahead and roll on down here, because there's other shit I want to tell you. Now, it can be anything. It could be beating his wife, driving fast when he's pulled over, pulling out his badge when he shouldn't, or smoking weed. It could be anything like this, but ultimately, if it destroys the credibility of the witness, and the witness happens to be the guy that wrote the entire affidavit, and is the guy that found the knife sheath, when everybody else that had been there all the hours prior to that didn't find a knife sheath. Ask yourself, they were there at 12 p.m. How do you go 4 hours, and then at 4 p.m., a motherfucker finds a knife sheath? 4 hours. Let this sink in for just a second. 12 to 4. No one looked, no one noticed the knife sheath next to Maddie Mogen. It wasn't under Maddie Mogen. It was next to Maddie Mogen. That is clearly, hold on, let me bring it back here. That is clearly what this bad boy said. Where are we at? That is clearly, when we're talking about the affidavit, Brett Payne's affidavit, you can clearly see it. It said laying on the bed. The leather knife sheath was laying on the bed next to Mogen's right side when viewed from the door. Let's let that sink in again one more time. The knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogen's right side, viewed from the door. I find that very interesting. All that time was not seen, but Brett Payne saw it. That's already been disclosed that he was the first person to recognize the knife sheath. How? 4 hours later. Nobody went to the third floor. Nobody looked at the bodies. Nobody saw the knife sheath. Maybe it wasn't there at 12 o'clock. Maybe it wasn't there at 1 o'clock. Maybe the knife sheath was there at 4 o'clock, because maybe the officers that's being investigated by Internal Affairs placed the knife sheath there. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying maybe. If I'm the defense, that's what I'm saying. 100%. Let's go see what, by the way, I want to make something clear before we continue on. I want to make something clear. This jackass right here, he can receive God's forgiveness, but it won't relieve him of the responsibility. Kohberger's prison pastor admits counseling the accused Idaho murderer is challenging stuff. This Bryan Kohberger, if you ever see this video, bro, stop dealing with that pastor. He's going to try to trick you into confessing some shit. And the motherfucker's going to the news and telling people that, you're not going to be, relieved of your responsibility. He thinks you did it, bro. And he's going to the news talking about it. How does this not cover the gag order? Just curious. Kohberger, stay away from the prison chaplain, bro. What the fuck are you doing? This dummy's gonna get him all fucked up. Meanwhile, all you motherfuckers that love to cancel people, now Kohberger's sisters lose their jobs. They're not even going to visit him in prison. One was an actress and one was a counselor. One was a counselor and one was an actress. They've lost their jobs. This man is innocent until proven guilty. Meanwhile, these beautiful women have lost their jobs. One was an actress. One was a counselor. That's a fine ass bitch, though. Giggity. Understand. And this is why I hate society. This is why I absolutely hate society. There's no reason in the world those women should be losing their jobs. But chances are, because people are so fucking soft, this is just what they do. This is just what they do. Let me move this up and put my face, get that shit up. Oh no, there we go. This is how society is. They'll cancel you for any reason. Kohberger's not guilty. Kohberger shouldn't even be fired. But the reality of this is now you guys are going, this is the problem with all you people, all you JLR type motherfuckers harassing people and their families at home. It's disgusting. And now these women don't even have their fucking jobs, their careers, all because of what you think their brother did.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Enton in for Dan Abrams tonight. He is on vacation this week. Thanks a lot, Chris. We're going to continue to cover this breaking news, these documents that just came out right before the show in the case of Bryan Kohberger, the suspected Idaho student killer, revealing what could actually be a major problem for prosecutors, possible misconduct on the part of an officer involved in the case. That was revealed during an internal affairs investigation and could involve information that could actually help the defense. In a notice filed to the court on Monday and released just a little more than an hour ago, state prosecutors have now notified the court that, quote, the state has become aware of potential Brady Gigolo material related to one of the officers involved in the above referenced case. That material in the form of confidential internal affairs investigation, key in on that word right there, is hereby submitted in camera to the court. And the state goes on to say it will disclose this information to Kohberger's attorneys, but because the information is confidential, prosecutors are asking the judge to issue a protective order to prohibit defense counsel from, quote, disseminating the information contained in the internal affairs investigation without court approval. Look, I know it's confusing. I was just telling Jesse Weber, who joins us now, I had to read the document like 3 times. I'm not a lawyer, but certainly this doesn't seem like a good thing for the prosecution.
It's not. So let me just break it down real quick. It's called the Brady Gigolo issue, right? So what that means is prosecutors by law have to turn over to the defense any evidence that might help the defense, might exonerate the defendant. And that...
Say that again. I'm sorry. What was that? What was that? Any information that might help and exonerate the defense? Dave, what did Kohberger say when he first got locked up? That he is confident he would be exonerated? Continue. Go ahead, continue.
That includes, and this is the Gigolo portion, any evidence that might impeach the credibility of a witness. And who have they referred to here? A police officer as part of an internal affairs investigation. So what could this be? What's the worst case? Let's say this was an officer that provided an affidavit in support of a search warrant for key evidence in this case. If that officer lied as a part of that affidavit...
Shut up. So now my dog all of a sudden is being a complete dick. Hold on. All right, handle that goddamn dog business. Anyways, think about what they just said. They literally just said, if it was the guy that perhaps wrote the affidavit for a search warrant, for any of that, I'm telling you, Kohberger is walking. Roll it.
David, if this officer withheld information as a part of that affidavit, potentially this evidence could be thrown out. This is a big problem for the prosecution. Now, I heard Dave Aronberg on Cuomo's show. This could also be something different. This could be something personal about the officer. But by law, they'll have to disclose it because let's say, here's a different example. An officer maybe had a pattern of misconduct. Maybe it wasn't directly related to the Kohberger investigation, but if this is an officer who maybe lied in the past or had some sort of misconduct, this is something the defense needs to know, whether they cross-examine the officer or not in a future trial. But I think this is going to be very important for the defense, and clearly we don't know what this information is. It is under seal, but I have seen cases before be dismissed because of Brady Gigolo violations and officers terminated because of this.
So damn! Cases dismissed, officers terminated. Tell me more.
Basically, it seems that there is an officer involved in the Kohberger case who has an internal affairs investigation. The prosecution has now decided we need to make this, we need to make the defense aware of it. Is it possible the prosecution is just thinking, look, this is a huge case. We want to be as careful as possible.
That is possible.
But let's do this anyway. Or does this mean that it's actually something significant?
They, by law, have to turn over anything that might meet that criteria. So they are doing their job. We don't really know how significant it ultimately is. But when I read the words of an internal affairs investigation, my first thought is whatever this officer did or did not do, it makes it seem like it might not just be this case. It could be some.
Exactly. This could be someone that regularly plants drugs, plants weapons. Does it really matter? The defense is going to use it. You got to remember, when we discuss this case, we have our theories, we have this and that. Some of you are against Kohbergers, people like me, I want to buy him a beer. But the reality of this shit is, the reality of this entire situation is, we are now to the court proceeding part of the case. And so now what really matters is, will Kohberger go to jail, to prison? Will he be found guilty? I don't think so. And I think that this, and yes, you're right, I do just like to be right. So at the end, whether he did it or not, I kind of just want to be right. Because, listen, I'm not one of you true crime people. I'm not trying to solve the case. I'm just providing commentary on the shit because I find it interesting. You understand what I'm saying? That's how I am with all these true crime cases. I'm just going to continuously provide commentary. When it comes to Kohberger, yes, if he did it, kill him. But I'm just not. Look, man, I'm a betting man. I like, I'm a betting man. I feel like chicken in the night, but I feel like Kohberger is going to be found not guilty, period. So that's just the route we're going to go.
Something further. And look, at the end of the day, we're not sure what the impact is going to be. But when you hear the Brady Gigolo violation, I've seen problems. I've seen cases thrown out. And officers, this is the last thing they want to be on. I mean, if you are put on this list of potential violations, it could really torpedo your career and can really blacklist you in a way.
So is it possible that we'll figure out what all of this means? Because there's the gag order in place. With this whole situation in case, we've been having to piece together puzzle pieces because there's so much redacted every time they release something. You think we'll get the details on this?
Potentially. There's a part of it where if, let's say this case is ultimately dismissed, I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I'm curious to see what would be allowed to be said about it or not. Then again, if this officer, and if evidence is thrown out, that's a separate question. But if this officer, whoever it is, makes it to a trial, they can be cross-examined about this material, and maybe eventually we would learn what it could be.
It's going to be interesting. Jesse, you were at dinner. We called you. Oh my gosh, there was a document dump.
It's important.
Come back to the state. Come back over here. Help us understand it. You did. We appreciate you coming out.
Of course,
buddy.
Bryan. Thank you. Good.
Thank you for watching.
Man, guys, you know my position on this. What do we have here? I have a feeling we're going to be saying JB told us very, very soon. Well, in June. But maybe not in June. We're to the point now where I wouldn't be surprised if this is a big deal. Charges are dismissed. I wouldn't be surprised if we wake up one morning and charges are dismissed. I do want to hear you guys' thoughts on this. What do you think about the sisters being fired? What do you think about the knife sheath being sent to Texas initially? What do you think about the internal affairs shit? I think we're getting news that's starting to pick up. Anyway, I love you guys. I'm JB Gunner. This is Crime Time. Let me know what you think. Whether you agree with me, disagree with me, I don't give a fuck. Suck my dick. I don't care. Let me know in the comment section. Either way, guys, if you would, if you want to support the channel, if you like what I do, feel free to hit the links down below. I love you guys. I will see you tomorrow in your next video on this channel. Be cool. I'm out.